This is our first session of 2025, and we're kicking off a series of performance diaries with Joe. But first, I should clarify that you are not seeing double. There's nothing wrong with your screen. We've persuaded John to come out of hiding because he's the one who comes up with the smart questions that we put to Joe. And so, for at least for the performance diaries, John's going to join us, and we're going to talk to. So I think what we're going to try and do is we'll try and do these like every week, and just explore the idea of performance as it relates to Joe's season, and John and I'll try and tease out like some lessons for business out of that. Happy New Year, Joe. Happy New Year, John, obviously. And I've got to kick us off. This is the point of the year where we're typically setting goals, whether we're doing that individually, collectively as part of a team or a business. And so, like, what we're curious about, like, what does high performance look like for you in 2025? Let's start there.
2025. It's weird that it's year three, isn't it? Like it's kind of blinked and it's all gone. And I think high performance is quite literally performing. Um, it's taken so long for me to learn everything, and kind of every time I do a new race, I think, all right, this is the one, this is the one. But finally, I'm at the point now where high performance is quite literally just win, or maybe not win in every race, but no excuses in any race, and all cards kind of on the table. I think is the way to look at it.
Nice. I want to dig into that a little bit. I love that you kind of self-corrected there about winning. Like, we just need to win everything. And then you kind of self-correct and said, "Well, actually, like all the cards on the table, no excuses." And that self-correction speaks to me more about performance because I would argue like winning is not performance. So it's just an outcome. Whereas going into everything this year with all the cards on the table, fully committed, no stone unturned. I like that. Like, what would the cards look like this year?
Funnily enough, the biggest or the most important card for me is actually off bike and not taking on other things which influence on bike performance. Because obviously doing what I do, you've got on bike and off bike, like kind of work away from racing, and then racing is effectively my day job or the big projects. Um, but probably the last 2 years, I've taken on too much off bike, and then that's inadvertently, or I don't know what you could call it, arrogance, ignorance, or overconfidence. I've thought, "Oh, I can get through it all." Whereas now I've been very deliberate in not taking other bits on and just focusing on myself, which sounds really selfish, but you do have to be selfish to be an athlete at the end of the day.
Yeah, nice. It's making me think about environment. So, and I know there's been sort of commercial consequences around this, and I like we're pretty excited to have you talk about the stuff that's new for 2025. And so, like, I definitely want to get to that. But it's making me think about how you're controlling the environment differently. That you've made some decisions about your 2025 season that means there's some off-bike stuff in your environment last season that became like not that helpful. What are those decisions, and what have they led to?
So I think the obvious one is like I was managing a race team day to day in 2024, and if that was great because off like you say away from racing, I do love building stuff, and building that team to what it became was an amazing experience. Just everything, like seeing the inside working of a relatively large business to just being responsible for running a 9 guy operation. But like the main focus these days is on me being an athlete, and you can't be the best athlete you can and run a team. And ultimately, the decision was taken out of my hands when the team folded. But there was a part of me, let's say again the arrogant part, which is like, I'll just rebuild it. We'll go again. I can find another sponsor, no problem. And then I sat back and was like, or I stepped back. I was like, no, 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 no. Kind of what's important for this time of my life. And I think the biggest thing I've thought of foul of the last few years is trying to do everything at once, like just rushing to do absolutely everything, and then forgetting that I'm only 24 and there's time to do the other things I want to do. So I think the most important thing is what A is racing at the minute at this point in my life. Maybe in 5 years it becomes B priority, but at the minute it's an A priority. So everything is in on A priority and try not to get distracted by running a cycling team, which let me tell you is a big distraction.
Yeah,
So I'm
nice.
kind of curious, even on the last 2 years, you've like doing the planning side of the calendar, you've always felt this overwhelming need to fill every single gap in the calendar with another race. And there's always something out there that you could do. Um, how is it different this year? And why do you think that is?
I've left pretty major gaps this year. And I think the last few years, it's also been motivated by financials. It's like I've always had this opinion if I'm flying to US, I need to race every single weekend because I've spent X thousand pounds to go there. Whereas now I'm more of the opinion. I think this is also just coming from A, learning it doing the wrong way, and B, having a little bit more confidence in myself as an athlete. I'm of the opinion it's better to spend the money and go perform than it is to just do the scattergun approach. There's big gaps actually before Unbound. I've completely wiped my calendar. Whereas in previous years, I go to the Raws to try and win that. Kind of screwed myself this year for Unbound when I crashed at 50 odd K an hour. So that's gone. There's a big gap in August because that's always the time of year where I get sick. So I've purposely got nothing in there. I mean, if I'm healthy, maybe I try doing another London loop or maybe I go to one of the UCI races. But I think planning my rests is just as important as planning my races, which I've only learned through last year's kind of downfall, which you can always see. There was one whenever Nick and I met in the service station around May. That was a big kind of catastrophe moment. Then there was one midsummer just before the Olympics. You kind of see my year both in its peaks but also in its troughs. So
Mm.
kind of trying to plan at the end of a big block or after a big race where there's going to be lots of stress, I purposely try to take at least 2 weeks off racing, if not a month off racing. Because the other thing is, my calendar the last 2 years has never given time to train. I'm always at my best as an athlete, March, April, when I've come off a big winter. So purposely planning training time, not just rest time, is important to performing in the back end of the season, I think.
Nice. It's making me think about, so John and I would have conversations with business leaders quite often um, around having real clarity about what it is you're not going to do. Um, and it's, the spotlight work that we did like highlights the optimistic mindset. And quite often, business leaders have some preference around that sort of driven, optimistic mindset. And there can be a tendency to try and do every race in business. And it would lead to a similar outcome. Like you end up compromising your performance. And so I love what you're saying about just having, it sounds like you've got real clarity about what you're not going to do. And then shaping the environment so that it supports that is really nice.
I think that's been my biggest taking from both the last 2 years of racing, but also from working with you guys. It's like you've almost allowed me to learn my own way by doing too much at times, but equally been like keep nudging me like this is slightly silly. You need to do less, you need to do less, go check your spotlight again. And I finally again through a mixture of both you two advising me, but also just learning myself, like a happy mix of them both. I've gone, oh, they actually know what they're talking about. I'll take that into next year. And I think there's probably a bashful, brational, whatever the word is, of youth, whereas like, oh, they know nothing. I can get through it myself. But eventually you go, oh no, they probably want to do the exact same thing. So I think that's been the biggest lesson.
Nice. That's what happens when you get old like us, Joe.
Old
Um,
and wise.
Old and wise. Tell us about. I know you made some press releases last week, right, around bike sponsor. So we'll change gears a little bit. Like there might be people who join in to listen, who'd be pretty excited to hear, like, what's the sponsor roster look like? What does that mean in terms of equipment, nutrition, how you're going to train, and so on?
Yeah, commercially, there's been a lot of changes going into 25. Again, as I said, some were motivated by wanting a change, some were motivated by changing where a lot of my races are going to be next year, like a big focus on the US, obviously. Um, the biggest one for any athlete is always going to be bike sponsor. Moving across to Envy, which is a American brand out of Utah. They are just, I'm not just saying this, they've always been like a kind of a goal brand. If you have any bike, you always want a pair of Envies on it. And since 2021, they've started making wheels. And when they came knocking, it was one of those, this is insanely cool, but not just because of the blingy product. It's more what they do off the bike, as in they take their stuff to wind tunnels, they develop everything. Everything they make, they ask why. And I didn't really realize this until my first conversations with them. And they were asking me to look at wind tunnel data, and I was like, wow, this is such a change. Your performance and style, which is very good. And also, like, Tadej Pogacar, the road world champion, rides their wheels, so I've not really got an excuse, have I? So that's the main one. And then off bike, or not off bike, sorry, away from the frames, like I'm changing tire sponsor to another American brand, Panaracer, and helmet eyewear sponsor too is switching across to Rudy, which again, their new TT helmet, I saw some very interesting science, which pure geekiness. The different color helmet tests differently aerodynamically because of how it heats up the air and things like that. Just I just geeked out.
Wow. Wow,
Yeah.
that's insane. So the fact that it's absorbing certain wavelength of light and reflecting others is having an effect on the flow over the helmet.
So
That's
to
crazy.
to paraphrase, the black helmet is very slightly faster because of how it heats up the air. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm quite a geek when it comes to bits like this. And I went, I've never thought of that. If you're thinking about that, I want to work with you. Uh, so there's just bits like that which I'm genuinely excited about. And yeah, it's both it's the people as well. Obviously, like I've spoken a lot about a guy called Alexei Vermeulen, who's effectively head honcho on the bike side at Envy. He's like second or third best gravel racer in the world, ex-roadie. Kind of the opportunity to work under him is again different because I called him up to ask him his opinion on a certain wheel, and we spoke for an hour about the different widths and the different tension of spokes. And I was like, wow, I thought I was a geek. You've taken it to next level. So it's very much it seems to be a growing up of sorts.
Mm. I love the idea that you've identified somebody in that environment that can challenge you and develop you with like such detail. I can't imagine you talking to John. Like John's pretty into his cycling, but I think even John might struggle to talk about a wheel for an hour. Clearly, like I wouldn't last 5 minutes. But the fact that, like, the idea of finding mentors, I would call it a mentor, like somebody like you aspire to their level of performance, that can that we can recruit onto our personal support team, and then use their knowledge to accelerate our development. I think is quite cool.
Yeah, and it just helps because it means you're not starting at square one. It almost you
Yeah.
jump to square 7 or 8 because all the lessons he's learned through the last how many years, you just straight away oh, don't use that wheel combination at that race because I don't know, the rocks are too big, so the bip's too fragile, whatever. It's all these little things which actually make a big difference when you get there.
It's making me curious about the environment that Envy's created, that he is generous enough to do that. Like I can imagine there'd be a lot of environments, certainly in business, where you might go to the guy who's the like or girl who's like the sales superstar and try and get their advice, and they would give you the sort of cold shoulder because it's like, no, this is my knowledge you know that's supporting my career. Why should I share it? But that's clearly not the case at Envy. Like the fact that Vermeulen's happy to share that information speaks to the environment they've created.
something I actually want to do a piece on myself is kind of the drag yourself up mentality, whereas some sports team it's the other way around, as you just said. I suppose some businesses too. Um, and I mean it's very rare, if ever, a bad thing if everyone's trying to drag each other up. Because like they were telling me about their wheels, one of their wheels they're developing, it's fast, but it's not the fastest. How do we make it faster? Whereas other brands I've worked with in the past is like it's fast enough, that's okay. So it's just a very slight change in mentality, which it gets my time trial brain going. And it's like, this is who I want to kind of partner with because they're thinking about the same things I am.
Yeah, nice. So run us through the sponsors. So Envy, Panaracer. Who's the helmet sponsor again?
Rudy Project, Italian brand.
Anybody
Uh,
else that should be like dial us in on?
and then we've got a returning, Castellia returning, again, another Italian brand. I'm pretty split between Italy and US this year, kind of somewhat accidentally. Two very different mindsets when you're working with companies as well, let me tell you that. Uh, but no, it's fun. Like I was just finishing my kit design last night actually, and seeing it all come together is it just looks like on paper it's just a kit design, but then every single logo or design is like, oh, that's been X hours of conversation and X hours of this. So seeing it all come together in one place is just nice. And yeah, I'll be sticking with the you'll be happy to hear, sticking with the black and white stripes. Um, again next year, a few changes. Like I'm actually making it more of a football jersey, keeping Pullwood front and center, and going for a big old name and number on the back because I've spoken so much about how cyclists should do more football stuff, and I'm like, ah, just do it myself, see what happens.
Yeah, nice. For the uninitiated, black and white stripes. So like it's not Newcastle United, it's Grimsby Town, obviously.
Yeah, from the better side of the Humber Bridge.
Nice. Right, last question. What's your support team look like for 2025?
Interestingly, it's kind of gone a little bit tighter. Um, I think I think trying to listen to less people is maybe a good thing. Obviously yourselves, I probably text John especially every 2 days, and I imagine he gets annoyed sometimes, which I'm sorry about.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and that's saying very much away from day-to-day racing things. Um, it's just good to have someone who's obviously invested, but isn't necessarily invested in their life isn't racing. So it always adds perspective, I think, to have someone away from what your main thing is.
Yeah.
My coaching team is pretty much staying the same. Tried and tested. Why change something that works? Um, and yeah, it's just trying to keep it small, even training partners, because obviously most of in cycling you train by yourself. There's not a training camp, not a training, what's the word? Ground, like footballers or whatever. I've been training by myself most of the time, selfishly. It just my two main training partners are out of town, so I'm just training by myself, and it seems to work. But I think a lot of athletes, especially when they go out solo, they try and listen to too many people, and everyone has their opinion of what you should be doing. But that doesn't necessarily mean you should be doing that. So yeah, there's a lot of time just in my own head and then running things off Maggie as well. And usually I can tell by her face within 15 seconds if it's a good or a bad thing.
Nice. So like smaller team, a bit more intimate, which kind of fits with the fact that you've trimmed some stuff out of your environment. Um, yeah, nice. Then, well, we're going to do this like fairly frequently, I think. Um, as I said, we'll call them performance diaries, and we'll try and check in. We'll try and we'll keep it short duration but frequent check-ins, and just explore a different topic. Yeah, we'll try and do it every week until your season properly starts with the first race. So thanks, Joe. This was awesome, and we're pretty excited about what 2025 is starting to look like. So yeah.
Thank you as always.